Hey, this is Jay.
And this is Chelsea.
Welcome to the Shifting Perceptions podcast.
We are bringing you inspiration to live a more creative lifestyle because our favorite people are the ones that choose the path less traveled.
What's up, guys? This is Jay Alders. This is the 56th episode of Shifting Perceptions podcast, and today's episode is with abstract artist Jason Chambers. This is one of these episodes where you could sort of just feel our energy. We immediately clicked, felt a really great energy from him, and Jason and I chatted at length about art and life and creativity and technology. We talked about traditional art, we talked about NFTs, we talked about marketing, we talked about strategy, we talked about having humble beginnings and the right mindset for creative people. I'm going to keep this intro short because we really dove into a lot, and I think it's best heard from just listening to the episode. But if you're an artist, if you're into traditional art, if you're into NFTs, if you're into crypto, if you're into marketing, if you're into investing, if you're into any of those things or just curious and want to kind of be a fly on the wall on our conversation, I think you'll like this one a lot. You can check out Jason's artwork on OpenSea. He has an OpenSea collection that is totally killing it. Definitely recommend you check out his work. He also has a website, jasonchambersart.com. So if you're not driving, you might want to check out his Twitter or his website or OpenSea collection and view his work while you're listening. And I would actually love to ask the same of you for my work. My work is on jalders.com. I have several OpenSea collections, and I have links on my website, jalders.com. If you go to NFTs, you'll see some drop-down menus with various collections that I have, as well as all my traditional artwork. Keep in mind, the holidays are approaching rapidly, and artists like Jason and myself totally appreciate your support during this time, as well as all small businesses, all creative people, musicians. Keep us little guys in mind as you're shopping, as you're gifting. And without further ado, let's get over to the episode. Oh, one more quick thing. If you guys have not done so yet, please click subscribe in your podcast player. If you're listening to us through Apple, it really does help if you leave us a review, even if it's just a quick click on the stars and just a quick sentence. That sort of thing really helps the algorithms of people finding us, and spreading the word, comments, all that kind of stuff is just so appreciated. All right, guys, let's get to it. Jason.
Hey.
What's up?
How you doing, Jay?
I'm doing great, man. Good morning. GM. Dude, I'm excited to chat with you. I appreciate you taking the time to get to know each other besides like avatars on Twitter. It's you've been like really cool, like, within the NFT space. You've been really cool to show a lot of support and good vibes, not only to myself, but like I just, you can kind of see what everyone's doing on Twitter, and you can kind of get a sense like, all right, this person's cool. This is a good person. They're doing good stuff for the right reasons, and you definitely like hit my radar as one of those people, and I also liked your work quite a bit, and so for those reasons I invited you on, and I'm really excited to kind of dive in and figure out who you are besides Jason from Twitter.
Sounds great, man. Sounds great.
Yeah, man. I did a little digging. I see you're a Georgia guy.
I am. I'm from Augusta, Georgia. I live across the river over in South Carolina now, but yep. So born and raised in Georgia.
I dated a crazy girl from Georgia once. I won't hold it against you, though.
There's a lot of crazy girls in Georgia.
Crazy people in general all over the place, guys and girls, right?
That's true. That's right. Absolutely.
Man, I'd love to kind of dive in to figure out, like, not only figure out and learn, but also to share with everyone listening, like who you are and where you came from. Like, what were you like as a kid? I want to know, like, I love connecting with other artists because I feel like we have this like weird shared bond in a lot of ways. We have a lot of stuff we connect with the way we see the world. And more often than not, I find that when you dive in, like the years before you became who you are that everyone sees, there's a lot of interesting connections there. So I'd love to kind of know who you were as a kid. Can you kind of describe yourself, like, and during childhood, maybe different phases and how that kind of related to who you are now, Jason?
I think that like I've always been kind of an introverted person. I've always kind of kept to myself. I've always created art for like as long as I can remember. That was always like my best friend, Yeah. Everybody would be out, riding bikes, playing in the neighborhood, and I'm in my room drawing or painting or something,
Yeah.
But I grew up like with kind of like an art background. My father was an editorial cartoonist for our local newspapers here, so I grew up with him drawing, the whole time. So I always wanted to kind of like, I guess, kind of emulate him. So yeah, it's pretty crazy. Like I said, I was just very, 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 very much a loner.
Yeah. It's interesting to hear that. I actually did editorial cartooning in my college paper for like 5 years, and it's a cool practice because it really helps you kind of develop like how you see the world and trying to find symbols and ways to create a narrative around a story. And I kind of see that connection with like what you described your dad doing to what you do, because you definitely have sort of like a narrative as well to what you do. Were you really like, for me, I'm the same way. I was really introverted as a kid. I was always like kind of like pick last for every sport and just kind of like I was just like hiding out in my room, and like I went skateboarding and I did a lot of outdoorsy stuff, but I wasn't as social or socially inclined as a lot of the other kids were. It seemed like art was the thing that kind of validated me. Was that sort of what it was like for you as far as like team sports and other activities went?
Oh, most definitely, especially with me being kind of a little guy. Anyhow, I was always picked last. So, but when it came to art, I was always, I was always fairly decent at it. So that was kind of like was like my strong suit. That's kind of what I stuck with. So, and that's kind of what people knew me for. I was kind of like the quiet artsy guy,
I do know that was totally me also, man. Can you tell me how your art like style kind of like, I want to like rewind before we land where you are now, but what sort of styles or techniques or methods did you find yourself, like what kind of periods did you find yourself in? What kind of pockets were you in up until, where we see your work now? Were you dabbling in all kinds of crazy different techniques and styles and methods?
Oh yeah.
Tell me about that, because I think people listening, like, they see artists like you or I or anyone else, and they assume that we just like popped out of the womb and started doing what we do, and they don't realize that it's like a messy journey. Tell me about your messy journey.
It was very messy. I had a really hard time finding like my niche, right? So I tried everything. For the longest time, I was into like portraiture, figurative art, landscapes, and that's actually the direction that I wanted to go in before I kind of accidentally found my style that I'm in now. And I think a lot of the portraiture and the figurative stuff kind of comes through in my art now, but I mean, that was like my whole focus. Like I wanted to be able to sit across from you and draw you. And at the end of now, when it's finished, it looks just like you.
Right.
But honestly, that type of work, while I think that I'm fairly decent at it, it's very, very, what's the word I'm looking for? Very generic. Very generic. I didn't really have a very like really good style for it. I didn't have a real good style for portrait work.
Yeah.
So, and it's like I had a hard time kind of finding my voice.
Was it something like for I totally relate to that, because I feel like for decades I spent a lot of time trying to hone, and still do. I try to hone my craft. And I dove into like so many books. I would spend like hours in Barnes & Noble reading every book on oil painting or every book on portraiture, or reading books on anatomy and like memorizing every muscle, because I thought that, like in air quotes, was the way to be an artist. And then at some point you think you're forced to either ease into the fact that like not everything in art is that, and like it's okay to do your own thing. And then once you embrace that, for me, and it sounds like for you, is sort of when things start to happen. Can you talk to some artists? Like a lot, I'm sure you get these emails and messages too, like from artists who are like, I can't find my style. How do I find my style? Blah, blah, blah. Like, and then it's like you see the same sort of things. Like when you see artists in like their beginning phases, you see work that they copy from everyone else, which is a fantastic way to learn. But then it's like some people, they just little this, little that. I'm going to copy this guy, copy that guy. And it's like, what's your advice to artists listening that maybe haven't yet found their style?
Definitely copying is a big thing. If you look at my art, I've taken stuff from all kind of different artists and made it my own. But in practice, I mean, you have to practice and you have to be willing to experiment and to think outside the box. Otherwise, you're gonna keep creating the same stuff. It took me a long time. I'm 42 years old and I've been creating my entire life. And it wasn't until like the last 4 or 5 years that I actually found the style that I'm in now and what I'm actually known for. So, I mean, you just have to be consistent with it, with practice.
I got to ask you this question because it's something I find myself constantly struggling with. So I'm like selfishly asking this because I really want to connect and understand and like relate and want to know if you relate as well. Do you ever feel, because I do at times, do you ever feel sort of held captive by what people expect of you? Like, is there part of like Jason's brain that's like, I want to go back to figurative stuff for like a week or two, or I want to do like, I want to paint landscapes and be the guy in the weird guy in the park that's painting trees. Like talk about that. It's something I struggle with all the time,
Absolutely. It's kind of like, well, I call it the Thomas Kincaid like syndrome, right? Thomas Kincaid, right? The artist of light, painted these beautiful cottages, right?
Yeah.
But once he got known for doing that, the man couldn't paint anything else. That's all people wanted from him.
Yeah.
And yeah, I definitely feel that kind of like Thomas Kincaid syndrome, really, because I mean, I love drawing portraits. I love doing figurative work. And I definitely want to be the weird guy sitting in the park, painting landscapes.
Me too.
But we've kind of painted ourselves into a corner, right? Where this is what we're known for. And all my time is consumed by creating the stuff that I'm known for. And there's just not a whole lot of time for me to go out there. I keep sketchbooks and I do like to sketch occasionally and draw a portrait. But I mean, before I was drawing portraits like every day. Now I might draw a portrait maybe once a month, every couple of months.
Yeah.
So that I definitely can relate to you on that, on the feeling that way.
It's like a super interesting topic for me. I hope you don't mind diving into it a little bit more because I find it really fascinating. It's like we as little kids, it sounds like you had a similar kind of childhood in some respect as I did. And it's like you spend your whole childhood like doing all sorts of creative stuff and all sorts of styles of work and cartooning and sculpture. I'm sure you did all that stuff as well. And then it's like you said, you paint yourself in a corner. And it's interesting. I think back to like this past year. I don't know if you saw the Genius series. I think it was on Netflix. There was one with Picasso.
Antonio Banderas, where he played Picasso. Absolute phenomenal.
Wasn't that amazing?
Yes. Yep.
And
it was. Oh yeah, absolutely.
It's like I dive into that. It's kind of like a tangent, but not really. It's kind of related to what we're talking about. But it's like clearly your work has some influence of Picasso, and even on your website when I dove in, you weren't shy about like dropping Picasso's name as like an influence and and I love his work as well. And watching that movie was super fascinating on so many levels. I never knew a lot of the things I learned, but one of the things that I've always admired about Picasso was that he was able to sort of just reinvent himself and shift around, and like he didn't just stick within the blue period. He didn't just do cubism. He was just kind of like, whatever the fuck I feel like doing today, I'm just going to do. And then it would like, that's like,
absolutely.
Like to me, that's like the holy grail of being an artist, like not being painted in, or maybe painting yourself out of a corner and just exploding. And I struggle with that fine line of balance, because I feel like the artist in me wants to just do everything. And I sort of kind of do, which is probably not good for my career. And I'd love for you to be the voice of logic for me. But then I also, I see both sides. How do you reconcile with that? Like, and do you see yourself at some point in a week or a year or 10 years, like being like, here's the next, carnation of Jason Chambers?
I hope so. I mean, I really do hope so. In fact, I was just having this conversation with my wife a couple days ago, and we were talking about how all my work is, it looks very similar. It's different, but it all looks very similar. And I don't want it to get to the point that I'm just replicating myself day in and day out for the next 40 years. You look at talking about Picasso, you look at like the last, 10 or 15 years of his life, and you look at that last body of work, it looks so different compared to what he was creating in the 40s and 50s. It almost is like a different artist. And I definitely would like to see my work evolve. But I mean, that takes time, and it obviously, like I spoke on earlier, you have to experiment. You have to be willing to think outside the box and try something different, And sometimes, like me personally, I'm kind of apprehensive about experimenting because I almost feel like I don't want to experiment because I might screw this up and then I just wasted an entire day when I could have been like working on this painting that I know how it's going to turn out when it's done. So it's kind of silly, but I go through this internal conflict all the time.
We all do. So I want to ask you questions that I think artists listening would be wondering, and maybe collectors too. So when you just said that, what struck me that I wanted to ask you, and I'm also reflecting on it myself, is it the acknowledgement of like, I don't want to waste my day because I'm not sure how it would come out, or is it more to do with like, I know I can spend this time for my wife, my family, and like make some money with this piece. I know it'll be received well. How much of it is in your brain? And it's an awkward question to ask. No one wants to think that artists are motivated by money, but we're people. We have families. We have bills. So it's like, it is a realistic thing. How much of that is in, each direction? Like, how much of the artist Jason is arguing with the business guy Jason?
Every day, all day long. Like you said, I don't want to be the pretentious artist and be like, it's just about the art. I mean, there is a money factor in there, and I know that if I spend it creating on something that I feel very certain will sell, versus me spending a day or a week working on something and then it just turned to shit at the end of the day. I feel like I've wasted a week when I could have been creating art that's gonna move.
Yeah.
So, that's about as unpretentious as I can. As I can be.
Dude, I appreciate the honesty. It's a topic that every artist thinks about, and it's like one of those things where you're supposed to not think about those things, but it's like we're freaking human. Like, you got to think about that, and so I feel like if it's worth thinking about, it's worth talking about, so other artists listening can like hear, someone that at your level of success. And by the way, you're freaking killing it. Congratulations. Fist bumping the camera here. Like, I'm so
appreciate it, Jay.
I like totally love like seeing like cool people that are doing cool art that are like just like crushing it. And by all metrics, you're fucking crushing it. So like, big giant congratulations. Like,
thank you.
And on that tangent, like when did things like pop, and like tell me that story, because like for anyone listening that is not following your work, I'm going to go on OpenSea so I can be more accurate. So volume traded 201 Ethereum. Like what? Like crazy, right?
That's insane, isn't it? I mean, that's nuts. I still can't believe it. That's crazy.
Holy crap! It's amazing. So tell me what that journey was like. Let's start where like let's start at the point where it's like you started to get curious about either crypto or NFTs. Right. And then after this, I want to backtrack to like before that, but let's get into that pocket of your current like notoriety and like craziness. Like, tell me that story. That's got to be an amazing story.
Well, the person that really that talked me into getting into NFTs was Gabe Weiss, of all people. Oh, cool. I've known Gabe for a long time through Instagram, and he was like, dude, you need to get involved. This is like around March. And I'm like, I don't know. I don't honestly, I didn't understand it. It was way above my level. NFTs, JPEGs, crypto. I'm like, I had no idea anything about it, And then I think around April, I decided, okay, I'm gonna try this. So minted a few pieces, and they just sat on OpenSea, and I didn't really understand kind of like I didn't understand that how important community is with crypto and NFT artists and all that. And didn't really understand a whole lot about marketing. So I would drop a couple pieces and they would sit, and then I would drop a couple more pieces. I think I ended up dropping like 20 pieces, and they just like sat for like forever. And then I think I sold my first piece in May.
Yeah.
And I was like, all right, this is awesome. I just sold a JPEG, this is great, and then they sat some more. So, and then around like, I think it was June, I had one collector come in and he bought my entire collection. Just one fell swoop, bought everything.
Holy crap.
And I was like,
what was that like? Were you like checking email or something? You're like, what the hell is happening right now?
Absolutely. I was checking my email and I had, your item sold, and it was like, 15 or 20 emails. And I'm just like, what the shit is this? Like
oh my God.
I had no idea. So I go on Twitter, and I hadn't been on Twitter very much. Like, my account is still fairly new. I haven't been on, I think I went on Twitter in like April was the first time I'd been on Twitter. And I went in there and said, thank you so much for buying, for buying out my collection, and the next thing you know, like, that's where everything kind of exploded from that moment on. So as soon as I would drop, they would sell.
Right.
And I was dropping like one of ones, and it continued until like what was it, August. Like I was making decent sales like June, July, and then the first week of August, OpenSea reached out to me about featuring me on their homepage.
Wow.
And I was like, what? Like, I know, like you see anybody that's featured on that homepage, you know, it's about to be a life-changing moment. Right.
Yeah.
So,
you know, things are going to pop.
And I was not prepared. I was not prepared to be featured, but I told them I was prepared. They were like, you know, this is what we want from you. Can you do this? And I was like, yes. And they're like, if you need more time, we'll give you more time. And I'm like, nope, I'm ready. Like, you give me a date and I'm ready. They gave me 3 days. So I created a whole bunch of art within 3 days. When I got done, I was like, I had carpal tunnel. I couldn't hardly move. I would get up in the morning, work, and then, you know, work all day and then straight to bed and then repeat until I actually went live on OpenSea. It was nuts.
Oh my God. What? So have you developed a relationship with this collector? Is it someone you can like anonymously or not anonymously talk about? Like, who is this person? Like, however vague you want to be.
Yeah, I do have a relationship with him. It's not going to make much of a difference. His name is Mike. He goes by Wow I Can Tweet, and he's the one that really gave me my first my first bump. Right. I mean, he really propelled me to like that next level. And if it wasn't for him coming in there and buying that, and not only buying it but giving me that confidence, like, man, I can actually do this. You know, I probably would still be working in a factory right now.
Jeez. What kind of factory were you working in at the time?
Yeah.
What kind of what were you doing?
I worked. So for the last 4 years, I've worked for Starbucks. We have a roasting facility in Augusta, Georgia. And so I worked there as a shift worker, working 12-hour rotating shifts. And, and then before I was working for Starbucks, I worked for a company where I was a chemical operator, and I did that for 10 years. Okay. So, and I've been doing shift work for like 20 years. So it's now I get to go to bed every night and get up in the mornings and draw for a living. So it's, it's a dream come true.
Dude. But actually coincidence, both my brother and my sister-in-law are both managers at Starbucks. It's a great company. You know, this is a complete like random. This could not be more of a random tangent in the conversation, but and it's like companies like Starbucks take a lot of shit because it's like they're corporate and blah blah blah, and it's like people don't take a step back. And I'm going to just put this out there: people don't take a step back and realize that yes, I mean the company's corporate, a lot of blah 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 stuff going on, but there's like real people like you or my brother, my sister-in-law who are like working, providing for their local families. And, you know, we like dog on these big companies, but they're providing, you know, livings for people like you or family members that we might know. And, it's important not to dog on people just because they're working for the man, because, you know.
And I'll tell you, Starbucks, you know, working for them, they're very big about community. And they take really good care of their partners. I mean, they really do. I mean, at the beginning of the pandemic, nobody stopped working. I mean, they paid hazard pay and all kinds of stuff. I mean, they took care of everybody. So I have nothing bad to say about that company. Yeah.
Shout out to my brother Eric and my sister-in-law Tiffany. Yeah, they're doing great. They love the company. Totally random tangent. Sorry about that. So, you know, so what were the, I've got to know, like, emotionally, when you're there with your wife and you're sitting there on your phone, you're like, what's your wife's name?
Her name's Nicole.
Were you like, holy fuck, Nicole, get over here, check this out? Like,
well, when that collection first sold out in June, I was at work. I was actually on a break, and I was just like, my head just exploded. And I'm like, what in the world? So, you know, I mean, it was pretty crazy. But from then on, like, my wife does all the bookkeeping for me, right? She tracks all the sales. And so each month she was coming into me, and she does the books at the beginning of the month. She's like, you know what you made in June? And I'm like, no. She tells me what I made in June. I'm like, holy crap. Then she comes to me in July. She's like, do you know what you made in July? And I'm like, no. Then she tells me, and then my head explodes. And then she tells me what I made in August. And I'm like, that's when I decided in August that, like, okay, I'm going to go ahead and leave this job and pursue this full time, because it's insane not to.
Yeah.
You know, just what the amount of money we're bringing in, you know, it's crazy.
Yo, guys, this is Jay. Just a quick break. No sponsors to bother you with. Just like a very brief, quick announcement or so. While you're listening, if you can just keep in mind that artists like Jason and myself use our artwork to provide for our families, and having any support at all, even if it's just a like or a comment online, that sort of stuff really makes our day and helps us out quite a bit. So just to give myself a quick plug, if you have not yet checked out my art, let's try talking here. If you have not yet checked out my art, I would love for you to do so on jayalders.com, JAYALDERS.com. You can also find all of my links to all of my NFT collections on OpenSea and Hen through the menu up top. You just go to NFTs, you'll find those links. I also have prints, posters, merchandise, original paintings, original drawings. Holidays are coming up quickly, so keep me in mind, jayalders.com, and I'd love for you to connect with me on social media. And again, check out Jason's website and his OpenSea collections. His work is awesome, and he's a great guy. So, yeah, just wanted to give you that quick note. And if you're on Apple Podcasts, or if you can click over to Apple Podcasts, a quick review or a quick star rating, that sort of stuff does go a long way. So, yeah, thanks for listening. Thanks for your support. Sending you guys a lot of love. Let's get back to it. I want to, it's just unbelievable. I'm just hearing it gives me goosebumps because it's like everyone wants to find a mic, right? Like everyone wants
right.
it. I've been like,
yeah.
I've been grinding as an artist. It's like so I'm like, I have a little bit of a different story when it comes to that because all I've done is be an artist my whole life. So thankfully I never had to like do all the incredibly hard shift work that you did, but unfortunately I'm not making the kind of Ethereum that you are yet. But looking at your work, there's like so many different like so much stuff going on. Like, can you tell me about like there's like some musical. I'm looking at your work as I'm talking here because just to kind of have it in the forefront of my head. You've got like some musical influences. There seems like some romance stuff. There seems like some spiritual aspects. There seems like some almost like tribal, like almost like ancient culture stuff, which I know Picasso was huge on with like the African masks and stuff. Do you find that, I know a lot of it's more intuitive. I've read that in your bio, and I get that because a lot of times I'll start my pieces with just a bunch of scribbles, and it just turns into some kind of weird shit. So I get that part of it. But
right.
Do you ever, after the fact, kind of do like a post-mortem on your work and be like, where did that come from? Like, what was I thinking? Like, what's the process?
We're down.
Are you like throwing back a beer? Are you like ripping off the bong? Like, are you have music playing? Like, tell me about your process.
We're diving deep. My process is actually my process is actually completely boring. Really, I do step back afterwards, and I'm always curious, like what the hell was I thinking? Yeah. And you can look at some of my work, and you can see when some of the pieces are like super busy. Right? I mean, they're really, really busy. I think those are days that I'm like really stressed out.
Yeah.
And you can see it. And then you have some pieces that aren't super busy. They have a lot of color to them, but they're not as busy. I think those are days that I'm like more relaxed. And that's the biggest thing that I take away from each piece at the end of the day is like how I'm feeling mentally. Even if I think that I'm feeling great, and I walk away from it and I see it's a busy piece, I'm like, man, I'm having a day today,
Yeah.
But there's definitely influences from Picasso and from music, and these influences they're not intentional. Like you hit on earlier, that everything that I create is intuitive.
Yeah.
And I do go in there with a random scribble drawing to begin with, and I kind of look at it like kind of like how a sculptor will sculpt a piece of clay or chisel away a piece of stone. Right? I go in there with this bare bones like scribble drawing, and I chisel away until I have a picture when it's finished. And hopefully, I'm not always successful, but I try to tell a story at the end of it. Sometimes I'm successful, and sometimes I'm not. But it's like I said, everything's intuitive. So it's there's no like I've got music playing in the background, and I'm like, oh, this is going to be a musical piece. I have one piece called The Musical Girl, and it just, when I was creating it, I saw a guitar, and that's how that's what it became. So.
Right. That's cool. It's interesting because we were talking a little bit before about like style and kind of like expanding at your borders in different ways and kind of stretching out of your comfort zone. And as much as, you mentioned like a lot of your work looks like similar, like obviously it's from the same artist, it's from the same collection. It's very clear, and you do a great job with consistency. It is cool to like take another, as I take another look and as I talk to you and as I hear you talk about your work, it is cool to now see some of the nuances that I don't think I noticed before as much. Like I see some of your pieces. Let me see if I can scan through. I think it was called Dreaming, where you have like more of a brush like. You use like more of a painterly type of a brush, and there's like some pieces where you like experimented with animation. Then there's like there's a piece you kind of experimenting with like a glitch kind of like effect from like maybe Procreate or wherever else. It's like I could see you kind of like you're in your fenced in yard, but you're kind of like stretching and kind of like I could see you like as a kid almost like let me see what I can get away with, or let me see if I can like peek over the fence and hop in the neighbor's yard real quick. It's like I could kind of see you doing that as I talk to you. Like it makes more sense now.
Yeah, the animated piece was definitely me going way outside of my comfort zone, and it took me forever to create that piece frame by frame. I mean, it was insane. And I'm like, when I got finished, I'm like, I'm never doing another animated piece ever again. But now I'm already planning the next animated piece. So I'm a glutton for punishment, I guess.
Yeah, those are a pain in the neck. I did one that I put out that I actually did like a long time ago. It was like 80 plus frames in Photoshop, and I was using like a Wacom tablet, which I don't even know if you really know what those are. Do you know what the
I do.
You have to like,
I got one.
Yeah, you got to like draw on your lap, but look at the TV, look at the screen as you're doing it. It was so non-intuitive.
Yeah.
I've been now that you have Procreate and an iPad, it's way easier. Even though it's still hard, it's like so fun and way more intuitive to do that. What I want to talk about now is if it's cool, I would love to jump back before like the NFT thing blew up and before Mike came in and kind of launched stuff off for you. Like what's interesting. And I don't know how do you take this? Like I go on your shop on your website, and you like still have like original pieces that are available. And this one I'm looking at right now is like very fair price, like $175 for like an original Chambers.
Right.
Versus you go on like OpenSea, and it's like you can get the digital version for like 10 times as much. Like can you make I want to like ask you that both as an artist, because like me being an artist, like if someone was like, oh, that's a cool oil painting you have over there. I know you spent like 4 months on it, but I'll just take the JPEG version of it. Like, there's one side of me that's like, oh, freaking awesome. That's cool. Buy it. It's great. I would love for you to own it. The other side of me is like, why don't you want the painting? What's going on here? So like, talk to me as an artist, but then talk to me so people listening that are maybe like more newbie in the space, it makes sense. Like, people ask me all the time, like, why would I buy that if I could buy this? Like, why would I buy your NFT JPEG when I could buy your original painting? Like, so talk to me as an artist, and then talk to me speaking to like maybe newbie collectors, if you could.
I think as an artist looking at it, it is a little frustrating, especially when you see this big pay gap between your physical work and your NFTs. And really, I think that boils down to two very different types of collectors. People that will normally collect my physical work aren't going to pay what an NFT collector will pay for a JPEG, right? So I think that you have to look at it like they're just two separate types of art, two separate types of collectors. If that makes sense. And that's what I've had to do, because like you said, you're looking at $175 or $250 for an original piece, and then you're looking at if you look at the monetary value of crypto at like what, $1,700. I mean, that's a giant difference.
Yeah.
So,
and
I don't know if I answered your question or not, but yeah, it's something that I definitely struggle with that aspect.
Yeah, it's just like peculiar, because like here you are, this like artist that's like freaking killing it. You got a great following. People love your work. Your work is great. It's awesome. It's fresh. It's cool. It's like funky. And then it's like you got an original piece here. I'm just like, well, I go back to like Picasso or like Salvador Dali is another one of my favorites. Like if I go back to one of my one of the artists that I love, and imagine them in today's time, and then imagine like if I could buy Salvador Dali's painting for $1,000, or I could buy his NFT, I'm like, I personally would rather have his original painting. So it's like a weird thing that even me as an artist in both the traditional and the NFT spaces, I still try to reconcile with. And it's like, I think for me, I don't have like obviously the exposure or the hype or whatever you want to call, whatever the word you want to use to describe that in the NFT space yet. But I have like the opposite scenario where it's like my originals. I've been selling some originals for like, my original paintings might be $10,000, $12,000, $15,000, $8,000, but then my NFTs, I'm not getting that yet. So I have the exact opposite scenario right now. I've been building my like traditional collector base in the real world for like a long time, and a majority of them have no idea or are not in the NFT space yet. So it's like I'm in the process of like, hey guys, check this out. It's awesome. It's new. It's the future. Like I'm trying to like educate and like sort of bring people in that have been supporting me all along. So it's almost like the exact opposite thing for me, which is weird, right? Like it's strange.
Yeah. Oh yeah. Like I said, it's just two very different types of collectors, right?
Yeah.
I mean, really, at the end of the day, I mean, I would love to see, like I have, so a lot of the stuff that's on my site right now, they're all drawings, and so I keep those at a more reasonable price. But then I have paintings, and my paintings will go for substantially more than a 5x7 drawing or an 8x10 drawing. So, but I think something that I've been doing here, pretty much almost since the beginning, was with my my one-of-one drops. Is I will include the physical piece. And I'm seeing that a lot of NFT collectors are loving not only owning the NFT, but getting to own the actual original piece too. So I'm including more and more originals with it. So
I'm glad you.
And I figure for what they're.
I'm sorry. Go ahead.
No, go ahead.
I was just going to say I'm really super glad you brought that up because I was about to as an artist and then collectors listening and artists listening, and it's a great topic. I feel like using NFTs as a certificate of authenticity is like such an obvious and great tool.
Yes.
That even artists that aren't understanding or are not hip to like the NFT thing as a pure JPEG, let's say, using it as a certificate of authenticity by itself is literally all the reason you need. Like, if I sell an original painting or if I sell a one-of-one print, to now be able to pair that with a blockchain verification, that alone makes all the sense that most artists should get into this, and collectors should be very excited about that. I've had some luck with that as well. I've been trying to experiment with that as well, like trying to find the balance of like pairing either originals or a one-of-one edition of the NFT, and it's gone well for me. I'm still trying to find the balance because by doing that, I sometimes would have to raise the price of the NFT a little bit higher than some of my other ones. So I'm trying to find that like nuanced balance, which is sort of difficult, but that makes a lot of sense. Can you like talk about your experience with that a little bit?
Well, I definitely think that when you do include that original, the price, if you were to just sell the NFT by itself, is one thing, but when you include that original, you do need to bump the price up just a little bit. It gives a little bit of added value to it. But I really believe that, though, in fact, my wife and I were talking about this morning, that this is the way of the future, that I believe that in the future that physical paintings are going to be paired with NFTs.
Yeah. And
like you said, it's all about provenance, right? So, and I mean, I think this is the way it's going to go. So it's just like you hear this every day that we're early. Well, eventually, this is going to hit mainstream.
Right.
So,
right. So, as far as doing that, like pairing your art with the one-of-ones, that brings me to the question of like, is most of your work now still a hybrid of like doing ink and then coloring it in Procreate or Photoshop, or are you all still digital? Or you talk about that a little bit? Some of your work seems to be all digital. Some of it seems like a hybrid. I almost can't tell, and you kind of can't. That's the great thing about digital art now. You really always can't tell.
Right.
Can you talk about that?
Yeah, there's definitely a mixture between actual physical works that I scan at a high resolution and my digital works. When I first started, I was pretty much just scanning some of my physical works and creating them as NFTs, and then I created like my first digital painting as just like playing around. I'd never messed with digital art before, and I'd kind of like I was kind of like I don't know what's the word, like an art snob, I guess. Like I'm a traditional art. I want to sling the paint on the canvas, and then once I got into digital art and realized there's actually like a skill set to it, and that you have to not only, I mean, you're still drawing the stuff by hand, and you're just using a different media, right?
Right.
And once I got into it, I fell in love with it, and I'm like, man, I can carry the studio, because I was still working at the time, and I'm like, I can carry my studio with me everywhere I go. I don't make a mess. I can work all day long, And but yeah, there is a hybrid between where I'll take some of my black and white stuff, and then I will take it and I will create a digital background around it, which is some of my favorite ones that I've done. So
you said you kind of implied that this is something that you kind of started doing, where you paired the originals with the one-of-ones. Like how if at all have collectors who've maybe bought some of your pieces that were higher priced and then they ever found out later on that original in real life is still maybe on the shelf, on the wall behind you right now, or on the shelf? Like, is that ever a situation where it's like, then if you would sell that original,
No.
someone would have a problem with it? Like, talk about that dynamic if you could.
Yeah, I haven't had any issues with that per se. I had an issue one time where I was creating limited edition prints of NFTs, right? Limited edition hand signed prints. And I had a collector that reached out to me. It was just one collector, one time event that had an issue with this. And, that's when the whole topic was these are two very separate things. Physical art and digital art,
Mm-hmm.
they have to be looked at differently. It's not this physical piece, even if somebody else owns it, it's not going to affect the value of the NFT. The NFT by itself is where the value lies. So,
Right.
And the same thing for the physical art. So you have to think of these as like two different, two different things.
Yeah, for sure. So we talked about style a bit. I'm wondering, are there kind of back burner projects in your head that at some point you pull the trigger on and you say, this is going to be a new collection? Like, is this going to be so different and deviate so much from what I'm doing? Are there kind of like dream projects in your head where you're just going to be like, this is the new me, take it or leave it, like at some point? Like when you hit like 1,000 Ethereum, you're like, fuck it, I'm going to try something new. Like, is there...
Honestly, I haven't thought that far in advance. I know that the only thing that I'm doing differently is I had started dropping a bunch of multiple editions, and now I've dropped back from multiples, and I'm focusing solely on one of ones,
Mm-hmm.
simply because of rarity.
Right.
And of course, what Ethereum is going for right now is absolutely insane. I mean, I love it, but it's insane. So I definitely want to keep just focusing on one of ones. I've got one project that I'm working on that's going to take me like 26 weeks from start to finish. So once I commit to it, it's definitely has an end goal at the very end of it. But once I commit to it, that's all I'm going to work on. So I'm kind of procrastinating on actually launching it, just because I know, like I said, once you do it, it's on.
Whoa. Is that something you could talk about, or is that you're kind of leave it there?
I'll just say I'll hit on a little bit. I'm working on a trading card collection, because a lot of my art has like the crowns and the kings and the queens. So
Cool.
it pairs really well with some really cool trading cards. And I know that it's going to have, at the end of the day, it's going to have 20 decks available. So you'll have 54 cards total, just like a traditional deck, but there'll only be 20 decks. And the way this will work is if you collect all 52 cards,
Mm-hmm.
you'll get airdropped like 2 animated jokers at the very end. And those animated jokers, if you hold those jokers, those are like my utility piece. So if you hold those jokers, you'll get free NFTs and free physical works and that kind of stuff. So,
Dude, that's sick. I love it. So cool. You're talking about the price of Ethereum. That's something I've been wondering lately. I've been talking to some other artists about that. Like, there's like if you're like super like hardcore crypto guy or girl, there's like the mentality of like one Ethereum is one Ethereum, just one Bitcoin's one Bitcoin. But then in reality, as NFTs and as crypto and everything becomes more mainstream, you can't really dissect the cohesiveness between the US dollar value with Ethereum. So it's like, it's one of those things where me as an artist have been wondering, like, as Ethereum creeps up and gets bloated, and who knows, maybe it'll be the new normal, maybe it'll be, who knows where it's going. But as that happens, I'm going to ask you as advice from artist to artist, do you suggest that we price it based on the US dollar equivalent of where our previous sales have been, or do we just stick to within the Ethereum mindset of one Ethereum is one Ethereum?
There's a lot of divide on that. I've talked to several artists, and you'll have, one camp that will say stick with the US dollar amount, and some will say, like you said, if you're selling for 0.5 or you're selling for one Ethereum, you stick with one Ethereum. It doesn't matter if that one Ethereum is worth $10,000.
Yeah.
I'm probably more in the camp of sticking with what the US dollar value is. I mean, really, because my goal at the end of the day is I don't want to hyperinflate my prices, because I'm making a good little chunk of change off of each sale, but then I want the collectors to be able to also turn around and flip it and make money. That way everybody makes money. To me, that's fun. If I sell a piece for 2 Ethereum, they're not going to flip it, and very unlikely they're going to flip it and make 4 Ethereum. I want to make sure everybody's making money, so right. I will probably stick with more with a dollar value.
Yeah, that's something I definitely think about, because I got into I got more serious about the NFT thing a few months ago, although I jumped in earlier on, and I kind of same kind of thing. I put some stuff out there, kind of sat, sold 1 or 2. It didn't excite me enough to put all my effort into it. And over the past few months, I've gone all in. And then over the past few months, earlier on, I sold some pieces that were 0.75, 1. I sold one of my NFTs for 1.35, which is amazing. But then as Ethereum has creeped up, I don't want to water down the value for my existing collectors. And I was curious how you thought about that for that reason. So I just wanted to be transparent, and in case other artists are listening, to kind of hear the thought process between us, because it is something that we put a lot of thought into. It's not like we're just trying to do a money grab. We're actually right. considering our collectors. We're trying to consider the market. So it's good to hear, your thoughts on that. So I appreciate that. Have you dove into other platforms? There's lots of talk about Foundation and how it's great for this and that, or known origin. Have you, or will you dive into Hikeknunk? I hate saying that word. Hen. have you, or will you dive into other platforms? That's the hardest word to say, isn't it? Hikeknunk.
It is.
Every time I try to say it out loud, it sounds so dumb.
No, I've sold on Foundation a couple of times. I'm not a huge fan of auctions. Honestly, they stress me out when you're sitting there and you're just waiting, and you're you're curious to see what this thing is going to go for, and if it doesn't hit your expectations, it's a morale crusher. And then of course, if it does exceed your expectations, you're yes. But I've sold on Foundation, and I was accepted to sell on Unknown Origin, but I still haven't even dropped a Genesis piece on that yet. Mm-hmm. That platform. I love OpenSea. Yeah. OpenSea has been great to me. It doesn't cost you anything to list. As we're Foundation and Unknown Origin, you're going to pay to mint it, and you're going to pay to list it. So to me, it's expensive.
Yeah, I mean, gas fees are a killer right now. Have you noticed? Have you Have you felt that, or not? Not so much.
Oh yes. I felt it hard. That's another morale crusher when you're. This is in full transparency, when you're selling, and then all of a sudden it's nothing. You drop sales, and you're like, what the shit's going on? Yes. Oh my God, am I losing it or what? And then you look and see gas is through the roof. Yeah. And then you had this all took around this is all around the same time as the convention in New York, so everything just came to a complete standstill. And I'm just and honestly, I'm in panic mode. I'm oh God, what's going on? But things are starting to pick back up. Gas is finally starting to kind of, get halfway reasonable if you buy in the mornings. In the afternoons and evening, is your shot. You're done.
Or 3 a.m. or something. It seems like a lot of my sales, I wake up to them, and it was in the middle of the night. And same thing here. I had a short burst in the beginning of my sales phase, let's call it. And it was just holy crap. I'm everything's going crazy. I'm going to get my ass into this stuff. And then all of a sudden, within a month or so, I think I sold something 4 or 5 Ethereum's worth. And I'm oh my God, this is great. And then all of a sudden, gas fees kicked in. I'm I guess I got to get a job at Starbucks.
I know. I told my wife, I told her I started panicking. I'm I think I have to go back to the factory. She said, no, you're fine. You're fine. Just my wife's she's my rock. She's just go in your studio. Focus on your art, you'll be fine. Yeah. And then sure enough, things are slowly picking back up. But yeah, it's definitely, it was, I was getting into panic mode for a minute.
Are you still putting effort towards your original stuff, your original pieces online? Are you putting, how much of your brain resources or your time or your energy are you putting towards NFTs versus kind of having I don't want to call it a safety net, because that seems retarded to say, but having that diverse streams of income has always been very important to me. I've always had my original sales, my merchandise, my licensing. I've always had many streams just in case, kind of thing. Can you talk to artists about that? Because I feel so many artists now, first of all, it's freaking weird because everyone wants to be an artist. When you're in your 40s, I'm in my 40s. When in our lives is everyone I'm an artist, I want to be an artist, I'm an art. That's what is going on? Am I in the upside down world from from like Stranger Things. Like, when is everyone an artist? And like, what the F is going on right now? Like, everyone's an artist all of a sudden.
Yep.
But then it's like so many people are just diving in and like wake up as an artist, and all they want to do is NFTs, and that's great. It's awesome. But it's like, I feel like if I was giving advice, I'd be like, diversify. Some people like original stuff. So talk about that to artists listening, especially the younger ones.
I am an artist who creates NFTs. I don't define myself strictly as like an NFT artist, and I'm very big about diversification and multiple streams, passive income. There's a lot that goes into it. You have to be prepared, because we could be going into kind of like an NFT winter, and things definitely slow down. And then people that put all their eggs in NFTs are going to be completely screwed. So you have to put focus in these other things. I think, and I put probably about 50% of my time is focused on my online sales. Like I've got a solo show here in my hometown in April of next year. I just finished up an exhibition in Paris this year. I've got an exhibition in Saint-Tropez, France.
Dude, killer.
Next summer. So I think I'm going to be in France next summer for as a resident artist, which is super cool. But yeah, you definitely need to diversify. I mean, it's great to sell NFTs. I love NFTs. They have been life-changing. Definitely, there's nothing wrong with going out there and hustling a little bit. I like the hustle personally.
Yeah, I love the hustle, and I love what you're talking about doing, like, traveling is great. I've done a couple shows. I did a show in Bordeaux, France, and like having that opportunity. And then I did a couple tours. I did 2 different art exhibits and tours in Brazil, and like having those opportunities to like see real people and like not just avatars, and like show your actual work,
right?
And having people like see the textures and ask questions, like that's great. And I think it's great to, like you mentioned before, like you mentioned about Procreate or digital art being like a different tool. And I think that's, these experiences you're talking about are just like a different social tool. Like you have like the internet, Twitter's great for some things. Like Twitter brought us together. We're having a real talk. Like that's freaking cool, right? Like, so that's
right.
That's important to like. It's important to be well rounded, no matter what. Good advice, I guess. Right, is coming from the 40-something-year-old artists.
Absolutely.
Like, be well rounded, young man.
Yes.
And young women.
Absolutely, and I think that people also fail to realize that when you're creating art full time, that this, at the end of the day, this is a business, and there's a lot of stuff that goes into it besides just like when I was in my 20s, right, and I dreamed of being an artist. So you think that you're going to be in your studio and you're slapping some paint down and you're going to gallery shows, and it's all about that. And then you realize that there's a lot that goes into it, and a lot of work that goes into being a full-time artist.
And another weird thing, and I wonder if you echo this thought, or maybe not anymore, because now you're like super famous guy. But like, I wonder if you, if you can like relate to this a few months ago. Like, it's like if I'm blaming, you put all this effort out into like being an artist because it's something you love to do, right? It's like let's say I love to do, I also love surfing, or I love different activities. But then once you do it for a living, it becomes whether you like it or not, it becomes work. It becomes a job, and it's and the persona, or not the persona, but these sides of myself that are curated enough to go online are not always what my life looks like. Like I have 3 kids. I spend a ton of time with my kids. We do a lot of stuff in the real world. We go skateboarding, we go surfing, we go hiking, we go rock climbing, all kinds of fun stuff. But there's also the reality of like, people are like, oh man, it must be great to just like surf all day and then paint and then do this and do that. Yep. I'm like, yeah, but you don't see me sitting in front of my computer for like 7 hours straight with my eyes bugging out doing marketing or setting up my website, or like hearing about my website has a problem and I have to deal with plugins now and I have to talk to developers on a chat, or like, like all these stupid things that like, so what's the other side of it? Like maybe, for you, talk about that, because people need to hear that. If they're an artist, you need to hear this is what the reality looks like,
Oh, it's the illusion of social media, right? You show that you're putting out a lot of content and everything, and people don't realize that I have all this planned out. I have a spreadsheet where I know exactly what I'm going to put out every single day. I mean, this is at the end of the day, this is marketing, right? So you have to treat this kind of stuff like business. I mean, there is an organic aspect to it,
right,
but at the end of the day, it's a business, right?
Mm-hmm.
And I mean, you are grinding. Like from the time that I get up, this is no joke. From the time that I get up at 6:30 in the morning, when I get up, I am immediately on social media, interacting, and then I exercise every morning, and then I get into the studio, and I'm in the studio by 10, and I'm in here till like 10:30 at night, whether I'm painting or I'm drawing or I'm working on the website or I'm minting NFTs. I mean, I'm always working, and I do this 6 days a week. And then I might do a little bit on Sundays. I try to take Sundays off, but it is nonstop work. And like you said, people don't realize you're in front of your computer for 7 hours straight, and you're, like you said, your eyes are bloodshot. You can't hardly use your hands, and you're just mentally, I'm mentally drained at the end of the day.
I don't know if you've gotten this too, but like I'll go to once in a while I'll go to a chiropractor, and they're like, "What is wrong with your back?" Like my one trap, the arm that I like hold when I'm painting, like I'm painting. You know what it's like? You're like this, right, with your arm up, like for hours and hours, and then occasionally you'll tilt your head one way if you don't realize you're doing it. And my chiropractor is like, "Why is your one trap like twice the size of your left one?" And then if I stand in a mirror, it's like embarrassing to admit because everyone's going to stare at me now. But like if I stare in a mirror, my shoulders are like lopsided because my one arm is like always in a position. I'm like, I look like a freaking I don't know, like what's that guy, the hunchback guy, you know? I'm like,
Notre Dame, right?
So the same thing. I'm like exercising like every day. I'm in yoga to try to fix my effed up back, but it's like that's like the reality. It's not just like, oh, I'm an artist, you know.
Oh yeah, people don't, like I said, people just don't realize what goes into it. It is not all puppy dogs and unicorns. It's really not. But I love it. It's the best job in the world, but it is work.
It's amazing. It's a high quality problem to bitch about for sure, right?
It is.
What I would love to know, I would like to kind of help other artists listening again. I would like them to hear your answer to this question. How do you deal with critique, with criticism, with failure, with any of those types of quote unquote like negative connotations that come with the job? Like especially when you're at a position in the public eye, especially when you have success like you do, by default, you're going to have some haters, right? So like, can you give any advice on that? Because that's a tough one to deal with. No matter how successful you are, one person can ruin your day by saying something mean.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that you just have to, you really have to look past it. If you let these people get to you, I mean, you're never going to create anything. I've been compared to a Picasso ripoff. I've been compared to a Gabe Weiss ripoff. I mean, these are the kind of things that happen, and people they're entitled to their opinion, and people will tell me that my art sucks or my art is. I've had people tell me that my art is, while it's pretty, it's not art. It's Art Deco, which is fine. And that's what they think. My art, I tell people all the time, I say my art is for anybody, but it's not for everybody. If you don't like it, that's fine. And you have to, when you're in the public eye like this, you definitely have to grow thick skin. I mean, really, because you're going to get a lot of haters. So,
yeah, it's good for people to hear that, because I think that a lot of artists getting into this space, I've had people DM me and they're like, I've been at this for like 3 months and I'm not selling anything yet. I'm like, bitch, I've been at this for like 10, 15, 20 years. Like, it's like, it seems to be like a wave of entitlement that people think that just because your work is or isn't good, just because you're working at it for like a couple months, that you all of a sudden should have Ethereum pouring over your head. Like you're a rapper in a
so much competition. Yeah. And there's so much competition out there, and we might not be competing for the, we might not create the same kind of art, but we might be going after the same type of collector. So there is a competitive aspect to it, I guess, a little bit. But I think the problem is people saw I guess what really kicked the craze off was Beeple, right? So like $64 million, right? Payday. So people see this as like they see it as a cash cow. Yep. It's a get rich quick scheme. And that's not what this is.
Not at all.
You have very few people in this space that make a shit ton of money out of this, and I think that you need to go into this space with realistic expectations. I've helped several artists, get into NFTs, and that's what I tell them all, is that you need to go into this with realistic expectations. Do not go in there. And I'll tell you, this is a mistake that I made from the very beginning, because I put a high value on my work to begin with, and it caused me not to sell a damn thing. if you go in there and you price yourself at a reasonable price to begin with, this is what worked for me, and this is what's worked for a few other artists. It's not for everybody, but you go in there and you price your work at a reasonable price, and you are able to gain collectors and able to gain the trust of collectors. And then as your work becomes, popular, then you're able to slowly increase your prices. You don't want to go from like 0.2 Ethereum to 2 Ethereum, but you want to slowly increase as you gain popularity. But people jump in this and they're like, oh yeah, I'm going to list this for 3 Ethereum. And then it sits, and then they're pissed that they didn't sell anything. And I'm like, this is not the way this space works.
Yeah. So what kind of advice did you give to your friends as far as what would be considered reasonable? What would be considered a realistic number if someone's listening?
I would say, especially with what Ethereum's at right now, if you want to get there and you want people to begin to collect your work, I would go in there at like around 0.05, 0.08. It's a reasonable price to start off. But you're unknown, right? Get in there and you're going to find a collector at those prices pretty damn fast.
I think gas is the killer with stuff like that. 'Cause if a new artist came in and go 0.05, and then gas fees are like $7,000, you're like,
this is going to sit. Yes, absolutely.
So we're kind of a hostage to the system when it comes to that. Before we wrap up, man, for the recording of the podcast, I'd love to chat with you afterwards as well. But before we wrap up the podcast itself, I'd love to know, or I'd love people to know, what else do you like to do? You mentioned guitars and music at some point. Do you play instruments, or do you have any other hobbies or interests? Like what else kind of makes you and your wife enjoy life?
I don't have a musical bone in my body.
No?
Like my dad and my brother, my dad and my brother can play guitar, they can sing and all that stuff. And me, it's horrible.
What kind of
I like to read.
Like?
I'm an avid reader.
What kind of music's your jam?
I am, of course, I'm old, so I still love like music from the '90s. I love '90s alternative.
Oh, that's the best.
It's kind of always my go-to, but it is.
Dude, there's a
all about Gen X.
There's like a station on Spotify. I think it's called like 90s alt or something like that. And it's like the best station ever. It's like Nirvana, Pearl Jam, Soundgarden, Temple of the Dog, like all that stuff.
I listen to that nonstop, but I'm also I like classical music.
Yes.
I like Americana, what's it called? Old Crow Medicine Show, those type of bands. So I have a very diverse, musical taste.
Yeah,
so.
yeah. Cool. Dude, thank you, man. This has been like amazing. I'm so glad we had a chance to like talk like in real life. Like this.
Me too.
This beats like some tweets back and forth, and it even beats Twitter Spaces. Is there anything else?
Absolutely.
Dude, is there anything else that you'd like people listening to kind of either know about you? I guess kind of give a closing speech, Jason. I don't know, stuff you're working on, like where people can find you, projects coming up, anything like that we can kind of cap the episode with that people can know about you or find how to find you and all that good stuff.
Yeah, you can definitely find me on Instagram at Jason Chambers Art. Obviously on Twitter at the same, I think it's at Jason L. Chambers on Twitter. I got a website, jasonchambersart.com. I've got several new pieces coming out like really, really soon. I'm trying to drop about twice a week. And I think as far as a closing note for NFTs, that for people to focus on community. This is all about community, and it's all about connections. So if you go into it with that mindset, you're going to be super successful.
I'm glad you said that, and I said it was going to be the end, but it's not, because now I have to go off on a slight tangent if it's okay. You mentioned like the community thing, and one of my friend Paul Ruston, who's a body painter, a photographer, he's one of the guys that got me more into it. He was talking about the community thing to me, and you're right, it totally matters, but it's so different than like the traditional art world. I find that it's so like that stuff, not that it doesn't matter, but it's like it feels like less cutthroat, at least at this point, at this phase of it. It feels less cutthroat. And I think here's my theory on it. I think some of that has to do with the fact that like artists are you are kind of competing over the same collectors, but you're not competing for wall space, which is a big mind shift. Like before, when I would do art shows, if you and I were in an art show and a dude walks in that just stepped out of a Ferrari, we're like, put my shit on your wall, put my stuff on your wall, because there's only so much wall space people have, right? Like, and now it's very different. I recently,
Right.
like about a couple weeks or a month ago, I had a collector buy one of my pieces for 1 Ethereum, and I was lucky enough that he connected with me on Twitter, so I can like thank him and connect a little bit. And it turns out he lives in a van in California, and I'm like, that's something that I couldn't have had before, because like before it was all about wall space,
Right.
or does it match my couch, or is my wife going to like it with the flower pot that's next to it, and now it's not about that anymore. And I wonder if that has something to do with like
Right.
the community aspect of it. Do you think it does?
I think so. Definitely. It really does. It really does.
It's weird.
Now you
Weird
look,
stuff.
like I said, you look at the traditional art world, and like you're right, there's a huge, competitiveness, but NFT artists, everybody's out trying to support each other and push each other and share each other's work. So yeah, it's a whole different world.
Yeah, dude. Thank you, man. This has been great, brother. I appreciate so much, and I look forward to like
Thank you.
keep developing a friendship and keep rooting you on. And anyone listening, you guys should go on Jason's website and gobble up these original pieces, because I'm telling you guys, he has like originals on there for like under $200 that it's complete nonsense that those are not purchased yet. You guys are freaking nuts. So everyone go on his website, gobble those up, and yeah, thanks, Jason.
Hey, thanks, Jay. I appreciate it, man.
Thanks, guys. We hope you loved that episode. If you did love it and could give us some love on iTunes, that would be amazing. You can leave a review, and we will give you a shout out at some point on this podcast.
Also, if you guys can follow us on social media, we would love to hear from you. We are on pretty much every social media platform at Shifting Perceptions Podcast, which is the same as our website, shiftingperceptionspodcast.com. We look and reply to all comments, so please share with your friends, tag us. We appreciate all the love.
And don't forget that all of our guests also see all these comments, so I'm sure if you want to just have a space you can reach out, these are the places to do it.
And lastly, thanks to our good friend John Harvey, who put together, produced, edited our show's music. Love you, bro.